Okay, good evening. It's 6:01. Let's go ahead and we'll get started. I'd like to call this meeting to order. This is a work session meeting for Manatee Springs City Council for August the 9th, 2022. And before we start off with the agenda and roll call, I'd just like to have we'd all stand for a moment of silence for the Deputy Sheriff from El Paso County, Deputy Andrew Peary. We'll just take a minute. Thank you. Judy, would you please take the roll call?
City Council members Judith Chandler,
Present.
Julie Wolf, here, Natalie Johnson,
Here.
Nancy Fortune,
Present.
Michelle Weatherholt,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem John Shada, and Mayor John Graham.
Present, thank you.
And by the way, Judith Chandler is on via Zoom. So
On Zoom. Okay, good. That clarifies it for the record.
can I just verify with Judith Chandler that she could hear?
Yeah, check.
I can
please.
hear all of you. Thank you.
Okay, and we can hear you, Judith. Okay. Well, at work sessions, we typically don't ask for approval of the agenda, but I see it's on there, so I'll ask for approval of the agenda. We have a second. It's seconded by Councilor Wolf. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, great. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, so our first discussion item is a presentation by the Pikes Peak Regional Building Department folks. They have some code updates pending here. We have Roger and Greg. Gentlemen.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. My name is Roger Lovell. I'm a building official for Pikes Peak Regional Building. And-
Roger, if you could be about 3 inches from the mic, it gets recorded, so.
A little better there.
That's better. Thank you.
Thank you. I told you I'd need a reminder. Roger Lovell. I'm the building official for Pikes Peak Regional Building. And I have Greg Dingrando, who's our public information officer with us. Tonight, we're here to talk to you, one, about the new proposed Pikes Peak Regional Building Code that we're working on. We started the process to review the new codes probably roughly about a year ago. We adopt codes every 6 years. The International Code Council is the body that basically generates these codes, and they do so on a 3-year cycle. We adopt every 6 years because a code change, not only is it a big undertaking, it's a big undertaking for the construction community as well to learn new codes. It's important to adopt new codes so that we can take advantage of new building practices, things that have changed in the industry, and at times take advantage of different code changes in the book. What the Pikes Peak Regional Building Code does is it adopts those codes by reference. And then on certain codes, we have the ability to modify or amend those codes. So what we're looking at doing this time is adopting the 2021 edition of the codes, which is the latest version of the codes. And it's been expedited a little bit, and it was expedited in part. We had planned to get the codes in place and be able to bring them to our bodies for adoption in the third or fourth quarter of 2023. Recently, there was House Bill 1362 that passed at the state level. And what 1362 did is it established a state minimum energy code, and it set some timelines in there. So we are looking to take advantage of one of those timelines, that timeline being July 1st of 2023. That's kind of our drop dead date and the important date for us. If we don't have our codes in place and adopted by that time, then we're subject to a new state code that has yet to be written that will increase the cost of construction substantially. And we don't quite know the impact of that code because it has yet to be written. So the goal is to get our codes in place before that impacts our jurisdiction. So with that, I can talk a little bit about the codes. We have a number of different codes. We have 2 state codes, actually 3 state codes that we adopt that are required to be adopted. Those are the electrical and plumbing codes. We don't have any, we can amend those codes, but we can only make those codes more restrictive. So we don't have any amendments to those codes. With that said, those codes are a little bit different than this latest change at the state level. We're required to adopt and enforce those codes as an agent of the state within 12 months of adoption by the state. So we kind of have a 12-month grace period to enforce those codes. We also adopt the mechanical code. There are no substantial changes in the mechanical code. The International Residential Code, that's a code that governs 1 and 2 family dwellings and townhomes. That code, there have been substantial changes in the years past, but there are no substantial changes to this code. It's just a little bit more refined. The biggest change that we see is in the energy code. We're on the 2015 International Energy Conservation Code right now, and we'll be moving to the 2021 Energy Conservation Code. And that will have a significant impact on the industry as well as the cost of construction. It is definitely a more efficient code and does provide for energy savings, but there are costs up front associated with that. And it will be the state minimum code after July 1st of 2023. Unless you have any questions related to the code adoption process or kind of some of the codes I've talked about, I can turn it over for Greg and he'll kind of go through the schedule of adoption that we have.
Julie, you have a question?
Are you going to tell us, or would now be a good time to tell us some information on what this new energy code contains, other than the fact that it's upfront costs, of course? What's in it?
That's a great question, and it's a very difficult question to answer because there's just what the Energy Conservation Code does is it sets the minimum standards for, I guess, insulation and the energy systems within a home. Currently, and what this code does is enhance those insulation requirements, as well as enhance the envelope requirements, or the kind of like an air barrier. So the ceiling of the structure, ceiling, not as in ceiling. Insulation, if you take your standard insulated wall and you put that insulation in a vacuum, it's very effective and it works very well. But when you have air moving through that insulation, it allows a lot more transfer of energy. So this code seals the structure up a little bit better. It also has provisions in it for LED lighting requirements, a number of other active type of energy saving requirements. Is that, it's
Yeah, I'm sure it's lengthy.
it's kind of thick book.
Yeah, but I mean, so it's still fine to use gas to heat your home, for example, as opposed to switching over everyone to electric and that kind of thing.
There are no, that's a great question, and thank you for bringing that up. There are no provisions in this code that would prohibit or penalize what the code calls mixed fuel use, or using electricity and gas. What the code that has yet to be written, from what I understand, it will include provisions for if you install a gas water heater, you would have to also install a 220 amp or 220 volt circuit to include a receptacle. So if the homeowner decided or desired to put in an electric water heater, they could do so. Obviously, that comes with a cost. Same would occur for a gas range. or any type of gas appliance. So in essence, what that code will do is penalize the use of mixed fuel. And it doesn't really incentivize electrical.
Greg, perhaps anything else from council at this point? Greg, why don't we go ahead and hear your presentation?
You got it. My name is Greg Grando, and I'm the Public Information Officer for RBD. I'll take you guys through the kind of code adoption schedule. I think you guys either have it on your screen or it's over in the corner. We rolled out the draft back on June 30th. And then the first round of public comment started on July 1st. And we are still under the first round of public comment right now. That will last until August 31st. And then we have about a month to kind of take the public comment that comes in and make any tweaks or anything that we might need to. And then the second and final round of public comment will be the entire month of October. And then after that, we'll kind of look over the comments that come in again. We'll make any tweaks that we think we need to, and then they will head to our multiple committees that we have. So the work sessions with our committees will happen largely in November, and then we will look for approval from our committees in December. And then as we get into the year 2023, that's when we will start to make our way to the 8 jurisdictions, including Manatee Springs, for you guys to look it over and to hopefully get approval. Obviously, the idea of this meeting with you guys is to kind of give you an idea of what's coming. We didn't want to come in January or February of next year and this to be a complete surprise to you guys. So we kind of wanted to give you a heads up, and that's why we are here today. We could go to the next slide. So this is just a look at kind of how our website looks. You can see in the very middle at the top, there's a red block there, and I've circled it with an extremely squiggly blue line. That has been updated. It is much more visible now. It is an extremely obnoxious green, and it actually drops down. There's some movement to the screen a little bit, and the whole idea is to draw more attention to it. We want people to be able to click on that. It will then take them to a screen on the next slide, I believe. You'll see this. So in the middle column at the very bottom, there's a button that is labeled technical code red lines. So that will actually kind of show you it'll compare it to the existing code. You'll see what's changed to kind of get an idea. If you want to look at the existing form in, as of right now, a clean version, there's a link over to the left. And then after you're done reviewing that, you can actually click on the public comment button, the red button off to the right, and that will take us to our next slide. So this is what our public comment forum kind of looks like. On the left, you can see we have it broken up into chapters and sections. So 3 chapters, and then chapter 3 is broken down into several sections. If you click on the green button in each particular section, it's kind of a shortcut. It will take you directly to that particular section, whether it be mechanical, building, or electrical, or something like that. So the idea is to kind of break it up. So if we have someone that's mechanical, they don't have to come in and read over everything and give public comment on things that they're not experts in. If you're a mechanical and all you care about is mechanical work, you can go specifically to that section, read over it, and then leave a comment for it. So again, on the right, if you click on the comment form, that's what you'll fill out the information, give us the comments there. You can either just type it into the body, just like an email, or you can upload it, whether it's a Word document, if it's a little bit lengthier. You are also able to click on the middle button there and actually see some of the other public comments that have been coming in. A lot of people like to see, oh, what else are people saying about this? So we have that area as well. Next slide. And that is pretty much it. I do have one final slide on a separate topic, but I did want to kind of open that up. Do you guys have any questions about kind of the process that this goes through and some of the messaging that we're doing?
Julie.
Who is it? Mostly the home builders lobbying that comments, or I wouldn't imagine your average Joe would log into this and have any understanding to comment. Who are your constituents that you're asking them to, I mean, you're asking everybody, but who usually responds to this?
Yeah, I think we'll both take that. I think we would certainly open it up to everybody. I mean, anybody would be welcome to comment. You're right. I don't know if a lot of homeowners would have the time or the interest to really look through a 140-page document, look at this, but we do have a lot of the building professionals, the homeowners, as well as commercial, that are going to be very knowledgeable and that have gone through this process in the past. The HBA, for instance, does have a specific board that reviews the code and kind of goes over this. So we've been working with them for quite a while on this, and they hopefully will be getting their revisions to us very, very soon.
I'll add a little bit to that, Roger Level. We would love to have comments from anybody. The reality of it is, to review the technical codes, not only do you have to review our proposed amendments, those are only a piece of the puzzle. And to get the entire piece of the puzzle, you'd have to review the 2021 codes as well. So it's a pretty lengthy process. And to really understand those codes and understand the amendments that we were going to create, it took our staff close to 9 months to complete that process. So it is a very in-depth process. We have received several relevant comments. Sometimes they'll come from engineers, architects, people who are skilled and knowledgeable in the codes, or already working with these codes in other jurisdictions, to include home builders and the commercial construction industry as well.
Anyone else? Any questions for Roger or Greg?
I have a question.
Okay, Judith?
Just a follow-up on Counselor Wolf's question on costs up front. I'm assuming that these costs are going to be incurred by permits pulled for either new residential and or commercial development or remodeling. Is that correct? So anybody else is kind of grandmothered in with the codes, that previous codes, is that correct?
With regard to the Pikes Peak Regional Building Code, if you're going to do let's say you have a home, and that's probably, or a business in Manatee, and you propose to do a remodel to that business, only the scope of your remodel is subject to new code criteria. So if we were remodeling the bathroom in this building, and maybe a door over here is not compliant with the code, only the work that you're doing in the bathroom has to be compliant. As it relates to the energy code and cost increases there, when we're doing remodels, the energy code kind of has limited applicability. If you're doing an addition, the addition would need to be compliant with the new codes, but the existing building would not necessarily need to comply. So the majority of the impact will be to new construction. And I guess I'd also like to clarify one thing that I didn't, that we're not going to propose any fee increases with the next version of the code either. So cost increases will be essentially increased cost of materials, which everything costs more now, as well as increased labor expenses up front.
Thank you.
Address your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
We do have one slide if you guys don't have any more question.
Okay.
I'll go next slide, please. And that is just to announce that our brand new north office is now open. We had a grand opening ribbon cutting last week, and we are super excited to have this now open. It is located at 3939 Cordera Crest. It is kind of just off of Powers. It actually overlooks Powers. Powers and Union would be your most notable cross streets. It's just south of Pine Creek High School, if you guys are familiar with that. Super excited about this for a number of reasons. Part of it was because with the expansion of building in the area, we've had to add staffing. We're kind of bursting at the seams a little bit at our main office. So this will allow us to move some of our staff up there, including our inspectors. So it's an efficiency thing. A lot of our inspectors, it's almost 40% of the building that's happening in our area is happening north of Woodman Road. So having this location specifically located to the north is a huge thing when it comes to efficiency. Our inspectors will be able to drive and get to their work area that much quicker because they no longer have to drive from our main office, which is just east of downtown near Memorial Park. So this office will offer everything, all of RBD services, including permitting, licensing, and plan review. Our plan review will be appointment only, just like at our main office right now. The one thing that this office does not have is the external agencies, zoning, fire, and utilities that are currently not Manatee, but Colorado Springs and El Paso County are in our current building. They will not be available at the north office. Really just encourage people to kind of check this new building out. If you're on the north side, it certainly will be much closer. For you guys, it will still be beneficial because the main office will be open and the main office will have, in theory, that much less of a load because a lot of people will be going to the north office. So we'll be able to move things a little bit quicker through the main office. And I'll let Roger if he had anything to add on that.
Good job.
Okay. Nancy?
Just really quickly, is there anything that our city should or could do to assist in making sure people know about the customer or the consumer comments?
I would just say kind of probably the first thing is just directing to our website, and then that block right at the top of the screen, it's now green. That's the best area to go to get on there, review the code, and then also give us your comments. And just keep in mind, we have a couple more weeks, or at least till the end of August for the first round of public comment. And then the second and final round is the entire month of October.
Roger Lovell, I'll just add to that maybe a little bit too. If you have constituents that have questions, don't hesitate to have them give us a call, talk to us, or come down to the department as well. And the same would go for city staff. Anything that we can do to assist you in the process is beneficial to us in the long run too.
Great. Any other questions or comments from council? I guess not. Gentlemen, thank you very much. We'll see if we can publicize this a little bit to help managing citizens know about it. So
Absolutely.
great.
And thank you for having us here this evening. We appreciate your time.
Great. Appreciate you coming over. Our next item is discussion of an ordinance adding a new chapter 12.38 to the Manatee Springs Municipal Code, establishing a tree committee, annual tree budget, standards for tree care on city property, and protection of public and private heritage trees. We have Skylar Beck from Parks and Rec here.
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. I'm Skylar Beck, the Parks and Recreation Director. I am here to present an updated version of the tree care ordinance. I last presented this to you on June 14th and have incorporated a lot of feedback that I received that night, as well as additional comments from city staff, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, the Climate Action Work Group, Jeff Parker, and others from the community. So your packet includes some of the highlighted changes that I made, sort of restructured a lot of it so it's much more clear per your feedback. So tonight I am here to listen to any additional feedback that you may have on this ordinance.
Okay, great. Thanks, Skylar. So council, I think we've of course had the draft, clean draft of the current ordinance plus the revised version with all the edits for us to review. So I guess I'd just like to open it up to council questions and comments. Nancy?
Thanks. First of all, great job on revising and enhancing and coalescing and so on. I'm still a little hung up on the tree committee issue. So in 12.38.040, it talks about creating or designating the PARAB as the tree advisory board. And I think, but then you go on to say that you're directing them in ordinance to create a tree committee as a subcommittee to PARAB. So I'm wondering if that's necessary. I think the duties that you've outlined are great, but they could just be added to the duties of PARAB. So I'm wondering why you chose to direct a tree committee as a subcommittee to PARAB in regulations, since PARAB can do that anyway. It just seems unnecessarily complex.
unnecessary to include in the ordinance or unnecessary to do? Because Parab would like to create this subcommittee
Right.
has a single focus on trees.
Yes.
So are you saying it's unnecessary to include that in this ordinance?
Yeah, my sense is that it can be done regardless if it's in the ordinance or not. Parab does have the authority to create subcommittees. You've already designated Parab as an additional, as the official tree advisory board. So it seems like all the functions and so on duties that you list for the committee could just be given to the tree advisory board, AKA Parab. And if they need to create a subcommittee as a tree committee, they have the authority to do that regardless. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So I'm not
Okay.
hard over on that. I just think it's simpler in ordinances.
sure. I'm okay with that. I guess while we're on that, anybody else feel differently, or do you all agree with that?
I have a comment.
Judith, please.
So just as a point of clarification on subcommittees, quite often boards, commissions and committees will put together subcommittees that are typically made up of members who are already voting or alternate members of the committee. So it was my understanding your tree subcommittee would be appointed from people that are not necessarily members of Parab, either voters or alternate members. Is that correct?
That is true, that the membership does say that that Parab and OSAC will provide liaisons to this tree committee.
Correct. But my question was that members of the tree subcommittee may not necessarily be members of either OSAC or Parab, that you may be looking outside those two boards for additional expertise to form your tree subcommittee. Is that correct?
If I understand you, Judith, the subcommittees can be formed with members other than members of a board or commission.
I'm okay with the language with the subcommittee as is. I see what you're trying to do, and maybe it's a little overkill, but it certainly, it's not a problem for me to over clarify. So that's where I stand on that issue. So that's my input on that particular issue.
I guess I could.
I'm also, as you might imagine, very into chain of command. So it starts to complicate that. So, but I leave it to you guys.
Whether-
I did have another issue, unless anyone has further comments on that.
Yeah, Julie.
Because I haven't read this as closely as I should have, but if the way the ordinance has been edited or revised, so if the subcommittee comes up with a recommendation, is it still the recommendation of that subcommittee and that gets presented, or does Parab have the right, do they have to adopt it? I mean, so that's where the relationship in terms of when you mentioned that about the chain of command, I thought, I hope they made that clear in here. Because if it's just going to be worded the way the first few sentences were, it's not clear. If the subcommittee, usually a subcommittee, I think, and I have less
Reports through the
experience.
master committee.
I would think they'd have to be, whatever their recommendation is, still has to be approved by the main committee. And I don't know if that's the case, if that's the intent, or if that's what it says.
Especially when a paragraph says that the tree committee shall act in an advisory capacity to the Parks and Recreation Board. And wait, there's another one in here. I'm sorry, I can't find it now. But there, I believe it said this tree committee would also act as an advisor to the Parks and Recreation person directly. And that seemed a little out of whack to me.
To me, it's not necessarily out of whack. I just want it to be clear, because if the subcommittee has authority to go ahead and make recommendations directly to staff, and they can bypass some kind of approval by PARAB. That needs to be clear, or if the inverse was the intent, that needs to be clear, but I don't know if it is, because I haven't
So
studied it well.
the intention was for the tree committee to be a subcommittee under the umbrella of PARAB, right? So later in the ordinance, we have a heritage tree program. The tree committee would evaluate heritage tree applications and make recommendations to PARAB as to which trees are designated a heritage tree. So PARAB is still sort of the, authority, the umbrella advisory board that the tree committee reports to.
Does it say in here if, what to do? I mean, let's just pretend everything isn't kumbaya. Does it say in here if the tree committee can get overruled by PARAB, yes or no? That's what we're talking about. We just want to know what's the deal.
All I have here is the tree committee is an advisory capacity to PARAB. So that I think. would
And then PARAB is
answer your-
advisory capacity to you.
And to city council, yes.
So it sounds like the tree committee then, by implication, the way you've structured it is useless unless it's rubber stamped by or modified by PARAB. PARAB
Which-
is the bottom line before it gets to staff.
And it just interestingly, before the update of the boards and commissions ordinance, the majority of these duties and functions just fell under PARAB. They were eliminated in the last update. So at this point, I would just ask that you think about it some more, and I think that we've raised some.
May I make a comment? Just to give Skylar some direction, maybe, under 12.38.040 tree committee, item A. It says duties, the tree committee shall act in an advisory capacity to Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. Perhaps expand that sentence to include kind of a broader chain of command sentence there that would cover it. So to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, which, under the head of the Parks and Rec Director. Would that suffice? I don't know if you can hear me, but I can't hear any of you. Can you hear me?
Judith, we're trying to
Hmm.
test. Can you hear me, Judith?
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you. It looks like we fixed the problem.
So I didn't hear any feedback from my comment. I'm not sure if my comment was heard, so I don't know where exactly where we are.
Judith, they, just so you know, everyone took about a 5-minute break so we could figure this
Oh,
out.
okay, so you can hear me.
Yes, I can. hear
Okay,
you.
good. So I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Good. We're just waiting for everyone to come back in.
Okay, grab some
And I-
water.
I did mention to the mayor that you would like to pick up hearing the response to your statement.
Thank you.
We've got Judith back, I believe.
Mhm.
Almost, we'll just about ready to start here. Okay, so Judith, you can hear us, okay? Give us a
I
thumbs up.
can. I
Okay,
can.
great. Okay, super. Okay, so we dropped off somewhere in midstream. Okay, what did you say last? And we'll try to pick up from there.
So I have some other comments, but I'll address them later, but just addressing Counselor Fortune's and Counselor Wolf's issue about chain of command. I was just recommending that that be addressed in 12.38.010. I'm sorry. Just lost it again. 12.38.040 tree committee item A, that could be clarified to address the chain of command. So for example, we could do, say something about the advisory capacity, the advisory committee reporting to the Parks and Rec Advisory Board. Anyway, that was
Okay.
my comment on that, so.
Okay, thank you. And while we're working the technical thing, there was a little discussion between Nancy, Julie, and Skylar. So that I think is going to maybe address your question.
Okay.
Skylar, do you want to
Sure.
respond to that?
Yeah, so I think I was able to kind of understand a little more and clarify a better path moving forward here. So the goal here is to meet the Tree City USA requirements and also to designate PARAB as the tree advisory board for the city. Okay. In our code, advisory boards can create subcommittees, can disband subcommittees. So I think that's what we're trying to accomplish here. And that's PARAB's goal as well. So they would like to designate a subcommittee, a tree committee, to carry out all the things that I'm proposing in this ordinance. So I don't think we need to be so specific about the tree committee makeup or the chain of command or anything, because listing these duties under PARAB and expand that role of PARAB will meet the requirements of Tree City USA and allow, that flexibility for PARAB to be the the governing body or the advisory board over the tree activities in the community. Does that make sense? I think what I'm proposing here is instead of talking about creating a tree committee, designated tree committee, some of that language, I propose we keep PARAB as the tree advisory board and include all these duties under PARAB and empower PARAB to create that tree subcommittee if they so choose.
Okay, good, thank you. Nancy, you want to respond to that? Is that kind of what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for. So I don't know if that is amenable to Judith, but I think maybe when.
It is.
Judith, how do you feel about that?
Yes, I'm completely amenable to that.
You're good with that? And Julie?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. I didn't care either way. I just wanted clarification in the ordinance, but that's fine with me.
Okay.
I think some of the language in there that Skylar put in there might very well be useful for PARAB to hold on to, because they may want to have their own little cheat sheet and say that those are the standards that they want to apply when they're making their selection for this subcommittee, because it's still useful information and it doesn't sound like it has to be in the ordinance since we can already create our subcommittees. So I'm fine.
Good, thank you. Other members of council on this topic, we're okay? Okay, so let's go ahead and push on then. Oh, I'm sorry, Nancy?
Sorry, I had one other question, and that is on 12.38.050 E, where it talks about protecting public trees during construction. I think this is great. I think we should protect the trees as much as possible. But I was wondering if there's a cost benefit analysis that is done in the event we raise the cost of construction by, $100,000 to save a tree. I mean, I'm exaggerating here, but not necessarily. It just seems like, because the implication here is that during no construction will be allowed if it's going to damage a tree, and the mitigation might be very extensive to protect trees that might be ultimately not necessarily worth saving.
Yeah, I think that's kind of why I wanted to include that last sentence about the director and or their designee to review construction documents and be able to make a judgment call. in
Okay,
those
and I was wondering if
situations.
that was the case. But as you know, our community is the benefit of saving trees is pretty high. So it could put you in a very difficult position. So I wanted to raise that as a concern that may haunt us in the future. I don't know how to correct it. I don't know how to mitigate it. So there you have it.
Oh, Julie, go ahead.
Sorry to drag this out, but just as I was looking at that last sentence doesn't make sense to me. That last sentence of E, whatever that Nancy was just citing. The director will review construction documents to evaluate the level of protection for trees that may be impacted. I don't think that means anything. I mean, maybe what you're trying to say is to evaluate, because of the context of our discussion, that maybe you meant to say the director or his designee will review construction documents to evaluate the cost benefit analysis of removing a tree that may cause significant additional construction costs to preserve. Maybe that's what you meant to say. But if someone said to me, I'm supposed to evaluate the level of protection for trees that may be impacted, that's too vague for me. If you could work on that sentence, that would be good.
May I comment on that?
Yeah, go ahead, Judith.
I would actually like that language left in, and I'll tell you why, because quite often the level of protection may just be putting a fence around it or wrapping it or securing it. So there's many levels of protection that can be taken that aren't necessarily expensive, but will save a tree that would otherwise be damaged. So I don't mind including language about cost benefit analysis, but there's many times construction workers will accidentally take out a tree with a forklift or something. And when it's appropriately protected by a fence and or wrapping and such, it's much harder for that to happen. So I'd like that language to stay in.
Yeah, can I
Go ahead, Julie.
have a conversation for a minute with you, Judith, about that? I didn't mean that it should be taken out, but now that you've made that statement, now I understand what you want the sentence to mean. I just think it needs to be reworded. Maybe what you want it to mean is that the director or designee will make determinations regarding the type of protection that is reasonable and necessary for the trees that may be impacted by the proposed construction. If that's what you meant, I don't have a problem with that. Just it's the wording to me. The level of protection didn't make sense to me, but I'm fine with the concept. It was just the wording.
It's interesting. Scholar, this made me think of something that just happened a few days ago. I got a call from a constituent who said that he had a dead tree on his property in the city. So he took it down. He was very pleased. So he should pass that on. One of the things that he had, I think, contacted the city back in the spring, and they said, although it's a dead tree, it's a bird habitat, and the federal law says we can't take it down until August. And so August 1st or 2nd, the city crew showed up. So that was a good thing. But it seems to me there's so many of these things in the background that council is not going to be privy to, that when we try to make things better, I think sometimes we make them so complicated that it becomes impractical. So I guess in light of that, council, I'd be more inclined to let it stand the way it is, to kind of give Schuyler and his staff some discretion in addressing the specifics of any given situation. That'd be my thought.
I'm fine with the concept. To me, but if I'm supposed to evaluate the level of protection for trees, I think we're missing some words. The level of there's no level of protect. I think it should say the type of protection that should be implemented to protect the trees, or the type of something like that. It was a sentence that doesn't make sense to me. I'm fine with the concept, but whatever. I'm going to let it go.
Okay.
I'll come up with a different word than level.
Okay, give you a couple nights to think on it and sleep on it.
That's all I'm gonna think about, yep.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Okay. And Judith, I see you have your hand up. Judith?
Yes, thank you. Just a few items. First of all, I just want to say I think you've done a remarkable job incorporating all of the very many suggestions that were made. So kudos on that. There are several typos throughout, so just a little bit of cleanup on that. I just wanted to mention in the memorandum, I mentioned this last time, that you did note that this ordinance replaces resolution 2019. And I just wanted to clarify on the public record that this ordinance does not replace resolution 2019. It may just address the tree issues in that resolution. But specifically to the ordinance, I'd just like to make two minor recommendations under 12.38.090, protection of public and private heritage trees, item C. And under number 1, I would like you to add or private. In other words, I'd like that sentence to read, any individual or group of individuals interested in identifying and preserving heritage trees may nominate a tree or grove of trees on any city or private property. And I don't know if you should including the property owner themselves, because I don't know if that's clarified here, but I would add or private property on that. And then in that same section, you have a 2A, but it's not followed by a 2B. So I would change 2A to number 3 and take out the words at least, so that it reads the nomination shall include, because you've been very comprehensive on all the things that it should include. So I think the words at least is confusing to me. And then obviously make the next two numbers 4 and 5. And those are my only two recommendations.
Can you clarify that real quick? So 2A, A is a,
So 2A, I would make number 3 as a separate statement, and then just say the nominations shall include, and take out the two words at least.
okay, got it. Thank you.
And then obviously the following numbers would be just 4 and 5. And then did you have any questions, Skylar, on the C1?
Nope, that makes sense.
Okay.
Thank
That's it. Thank you.
Actually, I do have a comment on that. Judith, I think your second remark, I'm fine with that, but the first part about nominating a tree for private property, I think it should stipulate that it be nominated by the property owner, as opposed to, just if there's members of the community that feel somebody on somebody else's property should have a tree. I think that's kind of presents some problems. Yeah.
That's a really good question to ask Skylar, because I wasn't sure if someone could nominate to go to a private person, say, I'd like to nominate the tree on your property. I would like a little more clarification on that myself.
So number 3, it will be number 4 when I update this, but number 3 says the owner of the property shall agree to the nomination. So the owner does need to consent to having a heritage tree on their property.
Okay.
But someone else can nominate the tree other than the property owner?
Yes, actually, the way it's worded, yes, someone else can nominate, but the property owner must sign the consent statement on the nominating form. So yes,
And the property owner has the right to refuse to sign?
yes.
I'd be
does
okay
it
with that.
Where does it say that? Can you just point us to that sentence?
Where they can refuse. I don't think I specifically say they can refuse.
But where does it say that they shall sign then? Where?
Number 3 in that section.
I guess, yeah, actually, number 3 does address that. Yeah, the owner of the property on which the nominated tree is located shall agree to the nomination by signing the consent statement on the nominating form. I guess may would be better than shall, yeah, fair, that paragraph currently identified as paragraph 3. I guess.
It's also clarified in item G, Julie. There's a sentence, however, a heritage tree designation does not prohibit a property owner from developing a property and or removing the heritage tree or trees.
Yeah, I'm having trouble. Maybe because I'm looking at the red line version, but
Oh, don't look at
I don't
that.
even see I don't even see a G.
Look at the
As-
clean version. So we're on 12.
Yeah, it's a,
Okay, maybe that's my problem. Yeah. The clean version is the tree care ordinance before, or
Yes, the first.
And Skylar, I believe that's 13.38.090, paragraph G. Is that correct?
correct.
You can all find that?
Oh, I see it now. Oh, I see. Yes, the last two sentences or the last sentence there. Like the city encourages, but we're not suggesting that we have the legal right to tell people what to do with their own trees, because that gets into
Correct. Yep.
legal issues. Okay, so it looks like you're safe there. Okay, thanks.
Okay, good. Thank you, Skylar. Let's see, are we pretty happy with that item then? Okay, we'll move on to the next question. Who's got the next question? I had looked at some of the notes I'd made the last time we did this back in June, and I was pleased to see that a number of concerns I had been addressed. So I feel pretty good about this. I think this discussion we've had here is productive also. Council, do we have any more questions for Skylar?
No, thank you for working on this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Skylar, I think we've given you a little bit of direction, but it's relatively minimal. If you feel that's okay, if you've got questions, it'd be a good time to ask them.
No, I'm comfortable with where this at. I will do another sweep through and catch any typos that are in there and update the tree committee section and a few of the minor things that we talked about. So I'm good with where this is at.
Okay, great. And let's see. Okay, right now, we're looking at September the 6th for entertaining this on first reading. And it gives you a couple weeks to do that. And council would it be okay just to bring this back for first reading, or do you want to revisit this at a work session? Good. I think we're pretty close to touchdown now. So thanks. Thanks, Skylar.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next item, item 3, diversity and inclusion training recommendation. We're going to be hearing from Kelly.
Mayor, may I introduce this?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. At our last goal setting, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but our last strategic planning meeting that was during the weekend, one of the things that you asked us to do is to look at inclusion and diversity training. I said I would look at it, and I gave it to Kelly, and to bring back a proposal, and then to see where you as a council would like to move forward. So Kelly's done some research, and she'll be presenting some opportunities, and then we'll ask for direction from council.
Good evening, everyone. So as you can see, I hope you all have a copy of the white paper that I've provided. It's very self-explanatory as far as the diversity and inclusion training opportunities that I would recommend. There's a group called Ardath Consulting, and wanted to provide the information to respond to you relative to the type of training that you were interested in. There's in-depth information regarding the consulting company itself. The one thing I did want to kind of touch on briefly is the consultant's bio for Tj Mcgrath. This trainer is very, very, very experienced, has a very great history of speaking engagements, not only to large venues, but also to small municipalities and organizations. We're really fortunate that this particular person lives here. She is a licensed attorney and a retired colonel. She has over 20 years as an Air Force judge advocate and more than 15 years in the public service with both executive and legislative federal agencies and leadership roles. Based on her skills and abilities, I would highly recommend her because she's very well versed in the various cultures and diversities that are prominent and needed in today's work environment. Did it have questions about her biography? No?
Apparently not.
Okay. She also has some consultants that she works with that may or may not be involved in the training if you select it. But I think that both of these people also have extensive backgrounds in this type of field. So the two trainings that she would recommend, one or the other, one would be the blindsided. So that one covers the understanding and managing bias. It's several units that would take a couple of hours over a couple of different evenings or days, Saturdays, or however we want to work it. But it primarily helps review the different forms of cognitive biases that influence us as individuals. And it offers a lot of opportunity to reach out within the group, brainstorm and learn from one another. The other training is connecting with respect. This one is also a great training. I've read a little bit more on this, but I think it's very, very helpful when we have different perspectives of personnel coming from different backgrounds, different histories. And it helps us bridge a respect for each other. So both of them are very, very good trainings. They're both very in-depth. We can make them as long and inclusive as we want, or we can shorten them as much as we want. So we can basically build the training to what we're looking for in the group. So that's basically what I'm looking at here. And I would like to go over obviously you can read the pros and cons, and I don't know if you have, but I will say that there's pros and cons to everything that we do. So one of the biggest thing is that the pros teach us the necessary skills to cooperate with others and so that we can all be successful. And diversity and inclusion training also provides a strong emphasis on justice, fairness, and equality. And then some of the cons, some people think that they're not the problem and they don't need the training. Some people view diversity as cynical and they don't take the content seriously. So there's both pros and cons. And I have listed out some. Of course, this isn't an all-inclusive list. And ready for any questions you might have.
Questions for Kelly? Julie?
Do you have a sense about which you think would be more appropriate for our staff, since you know our staff better than we do?
Well, this is for council, correct? So
This is for us.
yes,
Oh, I missed that.
yes, I'm sorry if that wasn't
Well, then
clear.
let me change my question. Do you have a feeling about which of these would be more appropriate for council? And if so, why? If you can, do you have any gut feeling on what you think would be most appropriate?
I really think that both of them are very, very good trainings, but I do see that maybe the connecting with respect might be a better option for the group, only because there are so many different views. Every time everybody comes into this room, you all have a different idea on whatever's being presented. And I just think it would be valuable for the group to be able to come together and understand why one has this view and why they don't agree with me and those type of things. I think that would be the most valuable for the group. You're welcome.
Other comments or questions? Nancy?
Yeah, and you said we could tailor it to as long or as short as we thought.
Yes, we can look at the different course lengths and we can build it, whether we want it just once or, once for 2 hours or 4 hours, or whether we want to do a continuing education type thing.
Okay. I would certainly be interested in getting some diversity training. And I was actually, whereas I guess I'm just with George Floyd and other issues that continue on and trying to understand different perspectives. My initial thought was the blindsided training, which is the opposite of what you recommended. But the other would be a very, 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 very close second. So I could go either way, but I think it would be useful for us to dedicate some time to some of this type of training.
I don't think that we would be limited to one or the other. If we can, based on the budget that we're looking at here, we may be able to incorporate both trainings.
Right. And my sense was we see how it goes with one of them. And then if it goes really, really well, expand upon it. But
Oh.
I'm open.
Denise?
Yeah, and Judith also has her hand up, but may I make a recommendation?
Go ahead.
Two things is I do need to do full disclosure is TJ I went to college with years ago. So I do need to state that I did to go to college with her and I just happened to run into her and that's how we got this. So I do need to provide that full disclosure. But maybe Michelle could work with Kelly and talk with TJ and come up with a plan because Michelle's been the one that's really driving the diversity. And then bring that back to council and those two could really come up with a plan and update and work on it and bring that to council for recommendation if council would look at such.
Thanks, Denise. Judith?
Thank you. When I was reviewing the packet, I just made the assumption that both of them would be included in our training. And I thought they both looked outstanding and I would love to ultimately take both of them. But I do agree that if I had to pick one, it would be the blindsided one, but I'd love to do a hybrid. That would be wonderful and incorporate some of both and have you bring that back because I would love to do both ultimately, but thank you for that. I'm really excited. This is exactly what I was hoping for. Thank you.
Thank you, Judith. Okay, we've heard from Nancy and Judith. They both seem to be in favor of this. Then we go around the table and see how other folks feel. Julie?
I'm all in favor of the hybrid approach if it looks like the presenters can put a package together for us. And I don't mean that we would have the entire, I'm not suggesting that we go through the entirety of both programs. That would be a lot of hours, but some kind of a mixture sounds like that would be useful. I don't really have strong feelings about one over the other. They're both interesting. So if that's doable, that would be probably ideal.
Okay. Natalie, your thoughts?
I'm comfortable with Michelle working with Kelly and the consultants on a plan for us.
Okay, thank you. John?
I like Julie's comment in terms of I like a little bit of both. Thank you.
Okay. Go to see Michelle. You've already indicated you'd be willing to work with Kelly on that. And that seems to me like that would be a reasonable first step. I guess of the seven of us, I'm the least excited about this. And not to say that isn't important. It just seems to me like we have a lot of work in front of us, and I'd like to be sure we get that done. I guess my druthers would be to think about doing this in January or February. But if the rest of council is interested and supportive of this, I will, I'll be a team player. I guess my feeling would be, Michelle, for you to get with Kelly first and then come back with a recommendation. If there's no objections, let's go ahead and have Michelle and Kelly get together and come back then.
Absolutely. And we also don't know what the presenter's schedule is too. I mean, we don't know. They might be booked out until December as it is. We don't know.
It could be. Maybe we'll have a real snowy January and we'll be looking for something to do.
So just, if you don't mind, just for my understanding, are we looking to do this in like a work session environment? Are we looking to do this on a different evening, on a weekend? What, just so I can start looking at dates with the presenter and we can determine what's best for all of you.
Okay, let's go around the room here. Judith, I'm going to start with you since you're farthest in the room. Okay. Okay,
Well,
let's do. We want to do this for like a day session or a work session or a couple.
Well, how many hours are Kelly, are you thinking that this will take? First of all, I'd love to do it in a work session, but it might not be possible.
As I stated, we could do it over a course of work sessions, a couple of hours here and there if we decided to get a little more in depth. It's totally up to you.
And is this in person? This presenter would come to us in person, or we wouldn't be doing this in a Zoom
No.
session? Or
You would come in person.
okay. Well, my plan A would be to do this over the course of some work sessions, if that's possible for the presenter and fiscally, if that's okay with her. If not, one work session, one, council retreat type session would be my plan B.
Okay. Got that, Kelly?
I did.
Okay. Julie?
If we do it, I have no idea how many hours we're talking about. I guess none of us really do, but if we did a work session from 6 to 9 and did that once or twice, and if that could fit in okay with everything else going on, that would be fine with me. Otherwise, rather than adding another weeknight to our schedule, for me personally, the weekend would be easier. A weekend day is as depressing as that would be to have to come here on the weekend.
Okay. Okay. Got that, Kelly?
I did. Thank you.
Okay, Natalie?
I'm comfortable with the work session. And again, I'm assuming you all will come forward with recommendations in terms of how many and all of that.
Correct.
John? He's agreeable
Okay.
to anything. I guess I'd prefer work sessions, maybe a couple of work sessions, 2 to 3 hours long, be my preference. Nancy?
Yeah, I just like doing this kind of training. I like doing this kind of training first. I like doing it on a weekend because it's so much more relaxed. However, that said, I'm fine with the work session or 2.
Okay, and Michelle?
I agree with Nancy. But I'm fine with the work sessions. Thank you.
Mayor,
Yes,
we have September 27th open right now for a work session with nothing on the agenda. So that might be something to look at to see if that would be an opportunity. And also October 11th is pretty light. So maybe between those two, we could do some training if they're available.
okay.
I won't be here on the 27th.
Okay,
It's not essential, but I won't be here.
okay, thank you. Then that wouldn't work. So we
I
can
think
look.
October the 11th, that was, we added, we were thinking of having Mark Snyder come in and give us the legislative preview. So let's see, we have to present the budget that night. So, but the pool study, that got pushed back, right? Okay, well, make that a place marker for now.
Could I give one more preference? If we
Sure.
do it on a work session, I would definitely not like it with anything else that same night.
Okay, I think that's reasonable.
Agreed.
Focus, yeah, agreed. Okay. Okay, Kelly, did we give you enough to work with?
I have plenty. Thank you.
Okay. Well, Michelle will add to your workload, so that'll be good too.
And if this is on a work session, then it would be like a regular work session where the community would be able to listen in as well, correct? We'd be on
Yes.
Zoom, so that might be a nice thing if there are people in the community who are accustomed to tuning into us on Tuesday nights. I don't know if there's more than 5 of those people, but anyway, okay.
Okay,
right.
great. Okay, thanks, Kelly.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Good. It's a little past 7:15. Natalie, I guess I'm just wondering, do we usually take a break about 7:30? We could take a break now. We've got 2 more items.
I don't think this will take very long.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and take yours, Natalie, and then we'll take a break after that. Okay, so the next item is economic development and the potential formation of a downtown development authority in Manatee Springs. And this, of course, Natalie had presented her thoughts on economic development earlier on, and I believe this is stage 2.
Right. So you're correct. So we did meet and during the board retreat on the 20th of March, I agreed to kind of come forward with council with some economic development ideas to discuss opportunities. Repeatedly throughout the course of the last several years, we've discussed in various meetings the idea of forming a downtown development authority in Manatee Springs. And ultimately, what we're looking at, if the bid was formed in 2004, the money that they accumulate from that is adequate. But if any additional costs were to kind of come forward, if anyone were to get hurt or any unforeseen situation were to occur, the bid would not be able to sort of absorb that. And so I think that needs to be examined regardless. The URA, I do want to correct that. It says on the slide behind you, the URA has 7 more years. It has 9 more years. But again, they've been discussing that idea of, who would maintain that area of town when the URA is no longer there. And then projects like the MAPS project, or just ongoing updates and upgrades to our sidewalks, to our infrastructure. How do we maintain those? And then again, development. What does that look like for Manatee? And if we can have some sort of a plan so that we can do it with intention, I think that is something that benefits all of us, residents, business owners, and our tourists. And then again, in the past, we've had organizations like the Manatee Springs Development Company that have existed to support some of these efforts, and they disbanded several years ago. And so we're sort of in this limbo. And a lot of these, again, these organizations are disconnected, and the DDA has the potential to connect. Yeah. So downtown development authorities, I've shared the research I have in the packets, and so I'm certainly not an expert on this, but that idea that we could unify some things, I would propose looking at a gateway to gateway DDA that would include Canyon and Ruxton and really cover the bulk of our community, downtown community, developable commercial community. If we were to pursue this, I would want to work with the Downtown Partnership in Colorado Springs to discuss what they do as well. Their DDA is 2 miles by 2 miles. And so I think the idea of having a 2-mile long DDA is not unheard of. But there are, again, some unknowns. Who determines what is our downtown? What does that look like? Would we meet the qualifications? Potential partners, again, there'd be a lot of folks that I think would benefit from this. Obviously the city, the chamber, the URA, the Metro Board, Crane, the Creative District, and then the bid, and potentially other partners as well. And then next steps. So the reason I'm coming to all of you now is that forming a DDA takes time. It takes about 2 years. There's a whole process, obviously, that involves community engagement. We're talking about, taxing properties, which can get very complicated very quickly if not done correctly. To research all the options, because again, I'm just presenting this one opportunity to all of you. Maybe there's something else out there. And then again, there's a funding component. I believe that some of the other partners would be willing to help support this financially, but we are looking at a total of probably about $30,000 a year for 2 years to do this. I believe if council was willing to contribute 10 to 15,000, the rest could be raised through the other partners. And again, collaboration obviously is so important in this. Creating a committee and then determining the city's role. So there is quite a bit to consider as we move forward with this. But I feel like looking 2 years ahead, this is an important thing to start now. Next slide. Pros, again, that unification piece, it generates long-term funding for city needs. It requires a development plan, which I think could be really beneficial. The cons is that there's an upfront cost. All of this may not result in the formation of a DDA. It could either be voted down or we could determine another direction. Funding the DDA, again, that is funding that would be restricted. It does include the opportunity for that TIF opportunity that could really be beneficial to the West End, but is also something that we need to seriously consider. And again, that piece that it will take several years to make this happen. So yeah, really basic, but questions, things like that. I do feel like the meat of the conversation I included in the memorandum. And then again, in some of the other documents. And I'm just bringing this forward to all of us because we'll be having conversations about the budget in the next month or so.
Right, exactly. Yeah, this is, we're coming into budget season, obviously, and strategic planning season. Almost assumes that there's, I mean, strategic planning is pretty much a year-round process now. Okay, council questions for Natalie or comments, discussion? I'm sorry, Nancy.
Yeah, I think this is a really great proposal. This if came out of our discussion if marijuana is passed in Colorado Springs. And I think that this is taking our most strategic look at how we're gonna develop and survive over time. So I do find this to be a very strategic proposal. And I would absolutely support 10 to 15K out of our budget for the next year to assess it. Because as I was reading the documents that you provided, it's very complex, lots of overlap, and impossible to absorb on one reading. So I think having someone who's experienced in this to come in and look at our situation here and make a proposal for what a DDA might look like here in Manatee Springs would be incredibly useful and helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Other comments? Judith?
Thank you, Mayor. It was a lot of information and I learned a lot. It was really fascinating, especially the 29-page document. I wasn't able to consume the whole thing, but I did a pretty deep dive into the section on describing bids and BDAs and versus URAs, and I learned a lot. I think this is a really healthy and robust discussion to have. My only concern is I might want to kick the can down the road and revisit the funding for it until after election season to see where we are with our budget and revisit this after that, because we may have a different look at it, and also with our discussion regarding the URA that's following this. So I'm not opposed to it. I just might want to put it on hold briefly until some other issues are known to us.
Thank you, Judith. I guess I would kind of echo Judith's comments as well. I'm pleased with the work you've done here, Natalie. You brought together several things that we have in the city now, the URA and the bid. And as I think about this, I think of the Metro District and the rest of our parking district and stuff, maybe trying to bring things together and make them a little more cohesive and a little more synergistic. I think this is really addressing a economic development question. So I think this is a good direction. And in speaking to the idea that we're going to be addressing the whole downtown, stretching from arch to arch, I think that's insightful. The West End is coming along. We're going to get the road done hopefully soon, and then we'll have the zoning rewrite done by the end of the year. So now it's time to think about what for instance, the West End should look like and redress look at the whole city. So I like that. Given the fact we've got a lot of work now pending, I think we could get some things finished off and not overload staff too much, and then kind of plan, but maybe not commit the money until we have a better sense of the marijuana vote in Colorado Springs. And that's only 3 months away. So I think we could maybe do some preparatory work and talk to some of these groups that you've listed here and see what their feelings and thoughts might be on this. Other comments?
I just agree with what you and Judith were saying, to wait for a little more information, decisions to come in, and then we can figure out how to get started or what exactly we want to do. I think this is helpful. I haven't read the whole thing because I've been out of town. But I think it's really helpful information for us to look at I'd like to wait till after the November election as well.
Okay, Nancy?
Just, I wanted to suggest a possibility of, since the staff's already doing two budgets, one for if it passes, one for if it doesn't, that we might consider including this at this time in the one that if it does not pass. Again, I just think that this is investment in our future and a fresh look at how we'll potentially look in the future. So I'm very supportive of it.
I think that's a good point. And whether the marijuana passes or not, I think this is a good direction to take. I'm just a little, I guess, hesitant to commit the money right now.
So, so two questions. So one, I do think that if marijuana doesn't pass, this actually becomes even more important that we have a strategy. But is it a funding concern? Because if I were able to find the funding elsewhere, would we move forward, or is it a more complicated conversation?
To me, it depends in part on what we end up deciding with the URA, what we end up deciding with the COG. Those budgetary issues. I'd like to know how those discussions end up before moving forward, and not just because of the 10 or 15,000, that's nothing with our budget, but more just strategically. Is this going to work with the URA? Is it going to work instead of the URA? I'd like to have more sense on what's coming down, what's going to happen with URA before really firming up my opinions on this new project.
I think John and then Nancy.
My concern about it is that it's too stovepiped. That we're only just looking at sort of the business interests. And it seems like to me, we ought to be thinking about a lot more complexity than that, than just what's the economic development thing. I think we ought to have a much bigger community conversation about what kind of economic development, what kind of visitors do we want? I think we see the cost of attracting the typical visitor we have right now with the large automotive footprint, the parking lots, the parking, the traffic, that type of thing. And I wonder if we looked a little bit further out in terms of just what kind of a community do we want to be, as opposed to, because I think typical kinds of business interests right now are looking at their bottom lines in the next 6 months and the next year. And I think what I've seen over and over again is businesses always seem to, oh, I want parking in front of my own business. You know what I mean? I need a parking garage really close to me. You know what I mean? My customers can't possibly imagine using a trolley or transit or parking at Hiawatha. It's too far away. And I think that ramifications of that kind of tunnel vision of some of these districts, okay, just really gets us into trouble. So that's my thought, is that maybe we need to have a lot bigger conversation with the community in general, as opposed to just siloing a certain thing that it just includes a certain strip of business, and they get real powerful and a very loud voice. And before you know it, nobody else has a voice in the whole thing. That's my thoughts.
Thank you, John. Nancy?
And I think that that's a great point, but my sense is that if we were to hire someone now, they can incorporate that conversation into the planning. And we might or might not, at the end of that 1 or 2 year process, decide that we want the DDA or don't want the DDA. But I see this person, if we hire someone to help work through all those issues. Again, I would rather start that now than continue to wait till we're in, really I don't like quick decisions. And it seems like we might be in a position to make a faster decision. So I think it could be incorporated.
Natalie, I'm wondering on slide 4 of 7, are you potential partners? You've got 6 listed plus 7th item, who else? And I guess John kind of spoke to who else a little bit. I'm wondering if in the next couple of months, it would make sense to meet with some community groups, like the chamber and the parking district and stuff, and kind of see what we agree on and maybe disagree on, and see where what commonality we might have or what our differences might be. And I think that's probably preliminary to actually getting a lot of momentum behind this. So it seems to me like we could get this started. Wouldn't necessarily have to commit the money. The money of $10,000-$20,000 is, it's not that much, as Julie said. Again, I think we want to be careful with money, even if it's not a whole lot, and kind of develop some focus before we bring somebody in, and we should be able to tell them a lot about the community, about what we already want. That'd be my take. So I would be, in favor of maybe getting some discussions going with these other groups. Other counselors? Michelle.
I like the idea about what Mayor John Graham said about talking to the potential partners. I also think that these conversations should start soon, because when you under next steps, when you said this is a 2-year process, COVID 2 years, March of 2020, and here we are, August of 2022, and it's been 2 years. And in the process, or not in the process, but during that time, yes, it felt like a long 2 years. And are we going to get through this? But in reality, it was really fast. I'm like, whoa, here we are, August 2022, school is starting, all the things. So, and if it's all right with council, whatever help Natalie needs, I would like to assist with that. Thank you.
And I just want to, I'm willing to talk to these groups. I think that's great, but I am going to avoid conversations around the money piece. I know right now the bid, they're paying 30 cents per square foot. And I know that's going to come up right away, right? Is how much it's going to cost. And unfortunately, I'm not prepared to answer that, but I have no idea. And so I just want you guys to be aware that this is going to be a pretty high level conversation with these folks.
Okay, well, it seems like to me that's a good place to start. Does that seem reasonable to the rest of y'all, or Judith?
Yeah,
Judith?
I really want to get a word in to appreciate what Mayor Pro Tem Shada said. I wholeheartedly agree with his comments. And again, I'm certainly not opposed to looking into this. I don't think we need to, in my personal opinion, I don't think we need to pay consultants to look at it now, because there's too many unknowns. And Councilor Wolf pointed out some of them, the URA issue, the COG issue. And so to me, it's just premature. It's great to have the conversation now. And if you, feel so inclined to meet with these people now, I think any information we gather is wonderful information. But and I don't want to just again thank you for your tremendous effort. But just as a timing issue, I just would like to. I would feel much more comfortable waiting until we have a real clear understanding. Certainly with the marijuana ballot issue, the COG and the URA playing a piece of this, playing a part in this too. So. That's it.
Great. Thanks, Judith.
The other thing, if I may.
No, go ahead, Julie.
The other thing, just to tack on to what you were saying, Mayor, is if we have a better, Hiawatha is moving along, if we have a better sense of what our parking plan is going forward with the city, I think that's also vital information before we start paying a consultant. I don't want them to have to come up with, 5 different potential scenarios, because we don't know the outcome of our parking availability or these other things. So I think that's one of the benefits of pushing it out a bit, and then trying to be more perhaps thinking outside the box or creative with, maybe the word economic is too limiting. I mean, if we decide that it's really important to have another park, and I'm not suggesting that, but for example, I would like that to be able to be part of the assessment and not just looking at, tax generating revenue. So those are my final comments.
Okay, good, thank you. Anything else? Natalie, if, sounds like you're willing to get some discussion going on these, with these groups.
Yeah, and I'm willing to revisit this at any point. I mean, this just, kind of came up as we were heading into the budget season. So that's sort of why I introduced this. And just so you all know, I obviously support that idea of having a creative way of looking at this. I just know that right now we have no plan. So we get whatever we get. And this is an opportunity for us to be intentional. And I don't feel like that intention means it's monetarily based. So just want to point that out.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the work you've done on this. It's very nice. Okay, let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break and come back at about 10 of 8.
Hi, Jeff. I'm
Yeah,
just
hey
trying to,
Judy.
hi, so I just want to make sure you can hear me and I can hear you.
Yeah, it's perfectly clear. I love it. Can you hear me okay?
I sure can, thank you.
Awesome. I'll pop my video on when people are ready.
Sounds good, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, if we go ahead and get started again. And I believe we have Jeff Parker on Zoom. Jeff, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you fine. How about you? Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. That's
Great.
good. So, okay, and in fact, we can even see you. We look over our shoulders, yeah.
Sorry for the lack of tie today.
It's okay. I think we can handle that. Okay. So the next item is consideration of several options for the future of the Manatee Springs Urban Renewal Authority, the URA. Okay, and I'm the individual who brought this up, so let me try to provide a little bit of background on my thinking, and then this is basically a discussion. I had prepared it was actually about a 5-page memo, and Mr. Parker looked it over and made a couple of corrections, so that was updated. If you read the first one and didn't see the differences, and Jeff, you can jump in here at any time. Several things. First off, the URA has funds. I mean, but they also are heavily restricted on what they can use the funds for. Once money goes to the URA, it belongs to the URA. The city doesn't get it back. However, we can allocate funding. We can reduce or eliminate the amount of money that the URA gets through the city. We can do that, all right. We can leave things alone. We could actually abolish the URA if we felt that was what we wanted to do, what we needed to do. And if we were to do that, we would we would have to meet all their financial obligations. We'd have to honor those things. My understanding is any leftover assets would go back to the city. Is that correct, Mr. Parker?
It's close to correct. The way the URA gets money is it gets money from what's called tax increment financing. And so there's basically two main sources of that. One of them is from the municipal sales tax, and the other source is from property tax. So you basically gets the incremental revenue above the amount that was received by the authority in the year before the tax increment provision was basically implemented. And I believe that would probably be around 2000. I got my notes here. It should be about 2006 or 2007, I believe, for the Manatee Springs URA. So the property tax increment comes from all the taxing entities that levy a property tax in the boundaries of the URA. And so any money that came from that would go back to those entities. Any money that is left that came from the city would go back to the city, like the municipal sales tax portion would go back to the city if there's any money left. So wanted to be clear that it's not all going back to the city. And then another point you had made, Mayor, was the city council can control how much funds the URA gets. Basically, you've enacted the property tax TIF provision that allocates the property tax revenue to the URA. The way you would change that would be by amending the urban renewal plan. And so that would actually require a plan amendment. There's a process for that. There's some ramifications for that. The city does an unusual thing, I think, from how other URAs we've dealt with handle municipal sales tax TIF. You basically have a provision in your urban renewal plan that says upon submittal of a financing plan, the city council can allocate municipal sales tax TIF to the URA. And so the way it's worked with the city in the past is that the city has basically received a budget from the URA and then allocated the sales tax TIF to the URA. So it's basically I think it's been treating the URA budget as the financing plan that's referenced in the urban renewal plan. And so it's not 100% clear because it's unusual, but the city council has the ability to control how much of the sales tax TIF it wants to allocate to the URA every year when it gets the financing plan. So just to clarify, you couldn't change the property tax tip without amending the urban renewal plan, but you probably can change the sales tax allocation on a yearly basis based on what the URA submits as its budget. So hopefully that's maybe a little more detail than you wanted, but that's the nuance there.
No, that was helpful. Thank you. This is kind of a complicated animal, so that background is useful. I guess relative to the idea of if we were to dissolve or abolish the URA, it was my understanding until a few days ago that would require a vote from the citizens. And Jeff provided additional information to me. So City Council, my understanding is that City Council can vote to dissolve the URA. We could put a ballot question out to the voters to see if they wanted if they were in favor of dissolving the URA. And in fact, I think there's two flavors of that. One is just kind of a referendum question that would be not binding on City Council. Part of my thinking in the last few weeks has been based really on a deadline, and that is with the upcoming November election. Thought if we wanted to get this on the ballot, we would need to do it soon so that we don't have to have a special election, just piggyback on the upcoming November election. And then, there's some things that go with that. Our deadline would be September the 9th. That'd be the hard deadline to add something on. Really, the county, and Judy's, I know Jeff had indicated to me that September 9th that was his understanding. Yours may be different, but we've got a deadline.
That's to get the language.
To
on
get the
ballot.
language on, right.
Prior to that, August 30th is the deadline to sign the IGA. That would say that we're having a special election. And so it would be the IGA with the county to have that ballot question on.
Okay, so August 30th, we would have to sign the agreement with county, and then we would have to have the wording no later than September 9th. Okay. And in the updated version of the memorandum, Jeff had provided a draft of what the ballot question could look like. And I used some layman's words and he used the appropriate legal terms. So he's cleaned that up a little bit. Okay, John, did you have a comment?
Yes, Jeff, I have a question for you. So the voters can dissolve the URA and the council can. Is same powers?
Yeah, so what the statute allows for is City Council can pass an ordinance basically abolishing the URA without a vote. And then another way to do it would be to initiate an ordinance that abolishes the URA. So I think that those are the same powers. So the City Council could put an ordinance on the ballot saying, shall the following ordinance be approved, and the voters vote yes or no, and the ordinance says URA is hereby abolished. So it's the same thing.
So it sounds like the powers are pretty much the same. It's just depending upon who does the voting, right?
Right.
Then what's the effective date of the dissolution of the URA?
Yeah, no sooner than 6 months after the effective date of the ordinance.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Julie?
So Jeff, this is a question for you. I just wanted to see if I heard you correctly. So when you were talking about property tax would have to be rebated back to the property owners, that was with respect to the money that's already held in the URA account? Is that what you were referring to?
Yeah, and assuming, let's assume that there's no outstanding debts. So you basically rebate, whatever's left over goes back on a pro rata basis based on the previous year's tax revenue. So if you get so much from, a special district mill levy, so much from like the county mill levy, you would just basically figure out what the percentages were, and then you would give that percentage and what's remaining in the coffers back to those entities.
And did you also say that the ordinance we have now does not mandate the URA to get a set amount of city sales tax, but that's actually supposed to be appropriated, although I don't think you use that word, annually by council.
Yeah, well, and so the URA plan isn't 100% clear, but the way it reads is that the city council may allocate municipal sales tax to the URA upon presentation from the URA to the city council of a financing plan. And so, it's not 100% clear whether that presentation was like supposed to be a one-time thing and then you allocate TIF funds to it, or if it's the kind of thing you just consider every year with a budget. But what I believe the past practice of city council has been, I think since the first day of the URA or the first year of the URA being in effect, was they just gave over all the sales tax increment to the URA, I believe every year. There's been a few years where I think we've paused it because of financial issues. We had an MOU where it was shared back. But I think in general, the city council has just allocated the full sales tax increment every year when there's a budget presented, other than in a few recent years, as I mentioned. So, what you normally would see in a URA plan is you'd see like a decision made to implement a sales tax TIF. It's only for municipal sales tax, by the way. It's not for any other sales taxes. So it would basically say, we hereby allocate X percentage of it or all of it moving forward to the URA, and that would be it. And it would basically be in effect for 25 years. But this one kind of seems to give city council the ability to make that decision every year when they get the budget. So that's how it's been done in the past.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah, Julie?
So since council has the authority to make this decision and we don't necessarily have to have the residents make the decision, we could either allow them to decide it definitively, or like Jeff said, we could allow them to make a recommendation to us, which I think would really make people angry, for them to bother to vote. And then we were like, nah, we're going to ignore you. But my gut feeling is that should be a council decision and not go through the whole ballot language stuff. Is there a reason, though, that do you think it would be best for the citizens to make this decision? They're not, I wasn't sure if you were advocating for that or what your thoughts were on that.
Okay. Yeah, no, good point, Julie. And just until a few days ago, I thought we had to do a citizens vote. So I was under that impression, and consequently that was kind of driving my thinking, and that we needed to meet deadlines so we could get this on the ballot if we wanted to do it. Since it doesn't have to go to the voters, it could be with council, that sense of urgency is, that can realistically be removed now. So it basically the ball's in city council's court if we want to do it.
And then in terms of the 6-month rule that Jeff just mentioned, how it can't be effective if we did vote, could not be implemented for the next 6 months. It sounds like, and tell me if I'm wrong, Jeff, that during that 6-month period, the URA would continue to collect their percentage of property tax, but we would be able to deny any city sales tax based on your explanation just now about the allocation. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's generally correct.
I have a
Natalie?
question.
So, sorry. Is it okay, Judith? I go.
Okay, Judith, so we'll do Natalie and then Judith after Natalie, okay?
Yeah. So I guess my question is the ballot
ahead.
question, which is just, why would we dissolve the URA as opposed to just keep the money? We can't take money from them, but we could decide not to allocate future funding to them.
I think what Jeff said, that's true for the city sales tax, and that's not true for the property tax. We'd have to collect the property tax and then rebate it back to the residents or something.
Right. But I mean, the bulk of the money that we've been talking about is
Okay.
sales tax.
So and I've wondered about that too. And so Jeff, hopefully you're listening closely. Okay, so if we were to change the the amount of money that we let them have. Let's suppose we just turn the spigot off altogether. We could do that. My understanding is the URA would continue to function. They would live off their savings. Okay. And I think their savings are considerable at this point. It means at some point we could turn the faucet back on, maybe not full if we felt there was something that council or the URA was going to do that the council wanted to support, there'd be that option. Now, my understanding is if we would dissolve the URA altogether, the money that they have in their savings account after we, meet their financial obligations, whatever's left over would come back to the city. So in one sense, you're not putting money in the piggy bank. Okay. That's if you turn off the funding. If you dissolve them, basically you're taking the piggy bank. That's how I see it. Jeff,
Do you believe that there will be funding there when we turn off? I mean, do you believe that?
I think their assets now are, well, I think with the anticipated, the projected money they were going to get this year, I think they were a little over $4 million in assets. Okay. So, yeah, I mean, that's, and I think the obligation they have would be with the Holiday Inn Express. I think there's like a $2.1 million credit, but I think what actually the Holiday Inn Express doesn't have to pay sales tax until they meet that $2.1 million amount. So basically the city's not going to get sales tax from Holiday Inn Express for the next 9 years. Denise or Jeff, yeah, if you want to, I hope
I can jump in. One of the benefits of keeping the URA. So I think there's probably some people don't fully understand how URAs work anywhere, including people who work with URAs all the time, but URAs don't have a set life. So the Urban Renewal Authority itself, doesn't go away at any point unless it's actually abolished by the city council. So, they can remain, an entity indefinitely. What does have a finite life is the tax increment financing provisions where you get money for a 25-year period from property and municipal sales taxes. That ends in 25 years. And so you can do a new TIF provision and a new plan and get another 25-year TIF. But if you do that, your base amount goes to whatever it is at the beginning of the new period, which is usually higher than it was 25 years earlier. If you get rid of the URA, then you'd have to basically go through the whole process of forming it again. And that then has to occur under a new law with some new requirements that aren't as favorable for a municipality. And so most URAs, most clients of ours that have URAs are trying to keep them in their current form and not having to be subject to this sort of new law that requires different board makeup that includes representatives from other entities, not just the city. And so there are some favorable reasons not to just get rid of a URA. And so, I guess you need to think about if you wanted to do a new URA and a new few in 10 years later, you'd end up having to form it under the new law, which is not as favorable to the city. So you could quote, shut off all the, future revenue to the URA. You really couldn't shut off the property tax revenue to the URA. I know it's a much smaller amount from what I'm seeing from the numbers I have. But because you'd have to actually revise the urban renewal plan to do that. And that would trigger the new law. So if you want to keep the URA in its current form without these, less favorable provisions of the new law, you'd have to allow the URA to keep receiving property tax revenue. But the way you've operated in the past, you could shut off the sales tax revenue and keep the URA in existence. And that would effectively, that would limit their ability to do things in the future because most of your revenue is sales tax revenue.
Thank you, Jeff. Judith?
That's clear as mud. Thank you. 2 questions. One, if the URA were to be dissolved in this 6-month period, could the URA continue doing business as usual? Could they enter into contracts and that sort of thing? And secondly, you said, it's difficult and expensive to dissolve a URA and then start a new one. What if council decided that we were going to go with, say, a DBA from gateway to gateway, to replace that? So if we're replacing it with something else, is that the same? Are those the same costs, or is that a whole different animal?
Yeah, I mean, a DDA is a Downtown Development
DDA.
Authority. It's a little bit of it's a different beast. It has, pros and cons, to a URA. So they all, each one of those sort of redevelopment vehicles has its own benefits and its drawbacks. And so if you don't want to have a URA, you don't think it's as good as a DDA, then there's no issues there. But it doesn't, if you'd ever thought that, well, I'm not really sure we want to give money to the URA right now, but we don't see any real reason to just get rid of it other than to get all the sales tax revenue back, then there's no reason, there probably is no reason to get rid of it, because they can just sit there and not do a lot. You can also keep a URA in place and have an agreement with the URA about what they're going to do with their remaining revenue. So if that's a concern, you could always work out a deal, right? I'm not encouraging you either way. I'm just saying that there's reasons why you might want to not just abolish a URA, because there's ramifications to forming them again.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks, Jeff. Nancy?
Yeah, I'm the liaison to the URA, and I was very disturbed when this came onto the agenda because the URA knew nothing about it. John, apparently you talked with Debbie the night before she went on a 30-day trip to South America and didn't have an opportunity to talk to the URA. Bottom line is, I think the URA has done exactly what they have been asked to do. And if we, and in compliance with the law, which I think is very complex. And I think I struggle to understand it, and I'm not convinced that a lot of other people understand it. When I saw Rick Hudson's emails and list of comments when he got access to this paper, I don't know how he ended up with it, posting it on Facebook, but the fact that he was putting out a lot of misinformation was very disturbing. And even in the paper that you sent me, John, it said that businesses are taking advantage of the city, and the businesses have to negotiate for this, and we negotiate, and everybody negotiates in their best interests always. I don't think that's taking advantage. That's just negotiating. So most importantly, I would say we are not in a crisis here. I have no problem talking about it and thinking about it, but we are not in a crisis mode. If we get in a crisis mode, I'm fully prepared to talk about diverting funding from the URA, but I'm not at all in that mode yet. And I think Jeff is spot on when it would be not in our best interest to dissolve the URA. The TIF is a very valuable tool that the council does not have, and can be used very well. And if we go after that as well, both the URA and their funding, I think it's short-sighted in that it's kind of like, you're looking for extra funding in the couch cushions, as opposed to coming up with a sustainable strategy for how you're going to develop. And the whole point of the URA is to get additional development in a blighted area. And if we don't continue to develop that area, then it won't matter if we don't have marijuana stores, because we're going to continue to have a blighted area. And I think that they have done some things to improve that area, and they have done it without much of our involvement. So to bring it at this point without communicating and coordinating with URA, I think is very damaging to our relationship. They're not our enemy, and I that is a slight exaggeration, but talking about they're doing this and they're doing that. Well, they're doing what is best for the city as well. And I keep hearing that that's not the city. Well, it is the city. It absolutely is the city. So the funding that goes there goes to the city. That's part of the city. So I just think it's very premature. I think before we even talk about diverting funding and definitely talk about dissolving the ORA, and I'm very, very averse to that option. I would like to see us communicate with the URA, build a better relationship, understand each other's positions better. And again, we are not in a crisis at this point. Discussion is good, preparing for crisis, but we're not in a crisis. So I just don't see any decision is needed at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I guess in the last, basically the last month, it was in our last meeting, we heard that we have $350,000 of the repairs that we need to make up at the water treatment plant. You know,
And that's water enterprise funds. That's
Oh, okay,
not- that's
it
not real
is,
fund.
it is, okay. And a few months ago, we found out we were going to be in the ambulance business. There's $650,000. And the water tank that we thought Uncle Sam was going to give us with $1.3 million, that price is going up. And it seemed like that was a no-brainer. We'd be able to get the water tank made, have a second water tank, fix the old one. After 60 years, we'd go in and do some required maintenance. And every time we turn around, there's another major expense lurking in front of us. And then I look at the URA, and maybe this is me personally, but you know, that they're entertaining ideas to gift wrap utility boxes, I think is just unacceptable to the rest of the town. The URA happened to be in a lucky situation. They got both marijuana stores, so they get, they basically won the lottery. Okay. I think that money should be shared with the rest of the city. Yes. And the URA has done some very helpful things for the city. I mean, the Becker's Lane Bridge, work on the WAPS project, you know, down at Columbia Road. You know, so that's been good, but they're in a situation, their mission is much different than city council. They have money and they have limited ways to spend it. We've got all kinds of ways to spend money. We're always struggling to figure out what to do next. And I don't see it getting any better. I am really afraid that the marijuana deal is going to pass in Colorado Springs. If it doesn't, I'll be delighted. But yeah, I think we are at crisis mode. I mean, do we wait till the enemy crosses our border, or are we going to get ready to fight? I mean, that's putting it fairly bluntly, but that's how I feel. And you know, maybe some of the urgency that I thought was there isn't there because it doesn't have to go to vote of the people. So we're not on deadlines to get it to get it printed in the ballot. Council could do it on its own. I would be definitely in favor of turning off money to the URA now and putting that in the general fund.
And I would ask again that before we do anything, we sit down with the URA, try to understand each other's positions, because I don't think that has been done, and give them a chance to weigh in on this as well and approach this as a team as opposed to just taking unilateral decisions. Again, I am absolutely open to discussion. I am open to at some point in time diverting funding if necessary. But I also see that the city is currently today in the best financial position that I've seen us in almost 5 years. And so that's why I don't think it's a crisis at this point. May we be in a crisis in another year? Maybe, but we're not there yet.
It's, you know, when you're on the Titanic and you see the icebergs, you want to maneuver as soon as you can. You don't want to wait till the iceberg's on top of you. I do feel it's a crisis, Nancy, and I realize we have different perspectives on that. I'm sorry. No, I don't know who was, I think all three of you want to say something. How about Natalie and then Julie?
I would also like to look at this as part of a larger plan. If you were to have presented a number of things you wanted this money to fund, I think I would be more comfortable having that conversation. But I do feel like if we were to just take the money and absorb it into our general fund, it would be gone and we wouldn't have any of these projects done. And so I think that it is worth slowing down for a moment, working with the URA and coming up with determining the results of the November election, going through the budget process, seeing where there are holes. But right now I feel like we've done this before, actually. We've taken URA money because we were afraid, and then we ended up giving it back because we didn't end up needing it. And so I also do not feel like we're in a crisis situation, but and I also feel like it is worth trying to work collaboratively with our partners. And frankly, people are volunteering their time to do what they believe is helpful for this community. I don't know why this feels very uncomfortable to me. I don't feel like this is how government is supposed to work, crushing volunteers so that we can, because we are scared right now. I think we can make decisions strategically and not based on fear, particularly where we are right now.
Okay, thank you. Julie and then John.
I just, point of clarification, when Nancy was talking, I believe you said, Nancy, Jeff is spot on that it's not in our best interest to dissolve the URA. That is not what Jeff said.
You're right.
I quoted you on my paper here.
I
I
apologize. for
believe,
that.
just for the record, and Jeff can correct me if I'm wrong, he was simply saying, if you wanted to shut it down and then start a whole new one, that would be a pain in the neck because of X, Y, and Z. But he wasn't saying, I think it's in the city's best interest to keep it.
No, and I agree with that. And let me
Okay.
reword that.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Jeff, I put words in your mouth that I shouldn't have. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what you were saying is there are very good reasons to not dissolve the URA.
There
Yeah,
are
I'm
good
just saying
reasons for not, and
there's-
two good reasons too. There are reasons on both sides, or are we asking him to take a position? Because if
I'm-
he's taking a position, that's fine, but he needs to make it clear. That is not what I heard him say.
I'm not asking him to take a position. I just heard him say that there are very good reasons to retain the URA as it currently is.
So I mean, I can clarify. I don't say,
Cross-examination. Jeff, are there very good reasons to dissolve it? That's question number one. And are there very good reasons to not dissolve it? That's question number two. Can you answer them both?
yeah, so those aren't really legal questions. And so like, I always try to, give you guys legal advice. And all I'm saying is that you need to be aware of what happens if you dissolve it and what you need to do to reconstitute it. And there's just ramifications. So, and they're good or bad. It's just you retaining the URA in its current form without abolishing it and then reconstituting it or making a substantial amendment to the URA plan allows the city to not be subject to a less favorable law in the future.
And one of the things that we were talking about earlier tonight, Jeff, was this DDA thing. Am I saying the right letters?
Yep.
Yeah, so actually, I'm not going to ask you that. I'll take that back.
Okay, all right, thank you. John.
Not often do I agree with Nancy and John at the same time. Nancy's laughing, but anyway, that's not true. I do quite a bit, but I think we need to have a joint executive session with the URA ASAP. There are some things that are going on in both bodies that can't be spoken about in public. And I think we need to get on the same sheet of paper.
Okay, Judith.
I wasn't sure if Michelle had her hand up. I didn't want to butt in. Michelle, did you have?
Can I just say real quick
Okay,
that
yep, Michelle and then Judith.
I really agree with what John Shada just said.
Okay, thank you. Judith?
Well, the fact that it isn't an urgent crisis, in other words, that council can via ordinance dissolve the URA does take, for me, the urgency off the table. I do agree that we should be meeting in executive session with the URA fairly soon, though. I don't want to put this off. I think that this although this is a difficult discussion, I think it's a really important discussion to be made. I have, when we talk about urban blight in that area in particular, I'm concerned that we are going to see the URA turn from one type of urban blight into another. I do not want to see the corridor of the URA become the, buildings like the Holiday Inn, which I think it did not enhance the URA. And I think it's just another type of concrete canyon blight. And that tax incentive agreement, in my personal opinion, it benefits the hotel. I don't think it's a tremendous benefit to that area. I think that the way the hotel was constructed really did quite a bit of damage to Fountain Creek. I'm also concerned about some of the things that the URA wants to spend its money on. I am perfectly fine with $65,000 for ADA bathrooms. I'm okay with $25,000 for some trees because there basically aren't any. I'm okay with $35,000 for Christmas lights. I do have some deep concerns about $250,000 for a bridge over to the walking path without a broader development plan, for example. So I do think that we need to sit down and have these discussions. And I am not opposed, I just want you to know, after those discussions of limiting the tax, the TIF that goes to the URA, at least in the short term, until we see what happens with the marijuana ballot initiative and revisit it. But I do agree with the mayor that we have some really important infrastructure issues that we have to deal with. I don't want to increase our residents' taxes again to pay for the, water tank because, we diverted those funds to somewhere else and increase the water bill. So I have some deep concerns about where that money goes. I think instead of wrapping, utility boxes for now, and maybe some art installs can be put on hold until a later date when we see how robust our coffers are. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Judith. Other comments?
Well, John, what do you think about, are you opposed to having, I'm not suggesting that there's going to be some fabulous outcome, but I do think that having this conversation with URA in executive session does make sense as soon as possible, especially since there's a lot of emotion going on right now, apparently the way this all got ruled out. Are you open to that? Can we stick that on an agenda coming up?
Yeah, I would be. I mean, and part of it again is I was again under the impression that it would take a vote of the people, and that if we wanted to, if we decided to do this, 3 or 4 months from now, then we'd be looking at a special election. But I didn't realize that council could do this on its own. So we do have that would be an option. So yeah, we could we could breathe a little bit. I think probably the idea of sitting down in executive session and hearing what they might have in the works would be okay. Talk is cheap. Not to minimize discussion, but rather to say that it's a good first step. But I do still pretty strongly lean towards turning off
well, I personally,
future funding. Yeah.
And I personally agree with that, and I'll probably be voting in that way. But I also agree with Natalie's suggestion that we talk to them as soon as possible. We may be able to negotiate some things that make us feel better while we're waiting until we have this big vote. If I'm assured that they're not going to go ahead and sign contracts for another hotel down there, like Judith was saying, that would make me feel really good if I just had some assurance that they're going to put some of their projects on hold until further notice. So there are things that could benefit us as a result of this executive session discussion. Because otherwise they can just do whatever they want tomorrow and then what the heck? They could sign a $3 million contract to do something that really upsets us and there ain't nothing we can do about it. So that's why I would really like to have an executive session with them ASAP.
Okay, and I think it seems to be that council's pretty much on board with that idea. The executive session, I mean, is there anybody opposed to the executive session? No, I guess not. And then Denise, you had a comment?
Jeff, I just need what can be discussed in executive session and what has to be in public, because executive session can only have certain things discussed, and what could we discuss there and what goes public?
Yeah, I mean, we'd be doing an executive session for negotiations. We'd probably be negotiating with the URA members about, upcoming projects. And so we can have discussions about the upcoming projects. We'll probably have discussions with them about how we're going to allocate our municipal sales tax revenue. So I think generally most of the matters we've been talking about in this meeting would fall within permissible executive session for negotiations.
Well, if council's agreed, that's what we'll do then. I mean, if that, okay, no objection. Judith, you're okay with that?
Pam?
Okay, that was my understanding. Okay, so we can do that. Judy, then I guess we don't need to, or we even, if you can call, let the county know that we don't need to add anything. Is that going to be easy enough for you?
Yes.
Okay,
absolutely.
phone
Thank
call,
you.
okay. Okay, well, no, I get that, but at the same time, after spending $21,000 on a special election in January, well, yeah, okay, well, yeah, plus it was a hardship on the staff, so, okay, we don't want to do unnecessary work or incur unnecessary expenses. Okay, so we'll try to set something up for a joint executive session in the.
I would just ask again that it be sooner than later. I really don't want to drag this out. I think this is a really, really key issue. So that would just be my 2 cents I'd like to throw in.
Well, can we come up with a date now and
Well,
and
okay,
look to
it's
see
just-
when
just-
that might be doable?
Wondering here, yeah, next week looks fairly full. In fact, we've got 3 executive session items for next week. However, we don't, I was trying to avoid having a meeting on August the 23rd. Normally that'd be a work session. And just thought, with August, it'd be nice for people to have a little time
I
off.
suggest you coordinate dates with the URA when.
Well, okay, but that, that's certainly a relevant point, Nancy. Well, okay.
So
URA
2 weeks
reads
after
when the
that.
4th Friday of the month? 4th Friday, yeah, when do they? Okay, so I mean, if they had their 4th Friday meeting, then we had the meeting afterwards. Well, calendar time. What I was thinking of was the 23rd of August. We've got that night open.
That'd be,
I think it would be good to have the executive session before their Friday meeting. So I would be supportive of the 23rd.
Okay, I guess Nancy was saying that, August the 19th would be their meeting? Okay, well, we did the 23rd. I mean, that would give them a chance to meet, then we could meet jointly on the 23rd. It's kind of the dates I'm looking at there. Denise, do you have thoughts on?
No, we could do August 16th. You're right. We have 3 right now. August 23rd or September 6th is a pretty light meeting, but I don't know if you guys want to wait that long. So any of those, August 23rd, we'd have to do a special meeting and make it that, which we just would need to post it as just the executive session.
Right. Well, okay, I'm wondering if we were to take some of the things that are on next week's agenda, could they be pushed back? Ballot language, we won't be doing that one. I'm sorry, Nancy.
I think next week they'd have to have any materials in by tomorrow. And I think that's, Debbie has COVID. And I just think that's a little soon for them to be able to prepare.
Okay, no, that's, yeah, and they may want to meet at some, prior to that.
Is September 6th too long for the council? Do you want to wait till September 6th? Because that's
So-
And we haven't started, I mean, we don't do budget until October, correct? So that's still in plenty of time for us to assess things. For me, September 6th is fine, but I know other people want it sooner.
Mayor, are you trying to avoid a meeting on August 30th? Is that?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I've got a commitment that week.
I would prefer August 23rd as my first choice with September as my second choice.
Okay, August 23rd. Okay, August 23rd is sooner rather than later, something like that too. Nancy, would you be okay with August 23rd, 2 weeks from tonight?
As long as the URA is good with it, I'm good with it.
Okay, subject to them being able to participate.
Jeff Parker, would you be available on August 23rd?
I'll check my calendar here. Got another meeting that night. It's at 7 p.m. So it would be difficult for me to do that. I could try and have somebody cover that other meeting. But they're covering that tonight for me to make this meeting. So it's a little tricky. Keep missing a regular meeting. Did it a little early. I could be there, before my meeting starts at 7, my other client meeting. So I could do it before that.
Sorry, Jeff, if you were to meet earlier, would that work for you or?
Yeah, I would. I could meet before. Oh, sorry. Was that somebody else? Sorry.
No, when could you do it, Jeff?
Well, so I have another commitment at 7 o'clock that night, so I could do it anytime before that.
So we could do Zoom from 5:30 to 6:30 or something like that, Jeff?
5:30 to 7. I'm on Zoom for the other one too. So
I don't know if we even need an attorney just for a preliminary discussion. I don't know.
Sorry.
Oh, okay.
I think we do, and I think we need the URA's lawyer as well.
Well, what would y'all say if we start at say 5 o'clock on the 23rd? That would be the only item we'd have that night. So hopefully we'd be done in an hour and a half, 2 hours, be out here by 7. That's okay. So those of you who have jobs, you're okay with that? Okay. Jeff, could we shoot for the August 23rd at 5 o'clock?
that works fine. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so we'll have to see if the URA can do it. And then Denise, if you can think of anything else that we need to. Okay, well, let's do that then. Okay, any further discussion on this? Okay. Great, Jeff, thanks. That was a helpful advice you gave there.
Absolutely. You're welcome. Well, have a great night, everybody.
Cheers.
Bye.
Okay, that takes us to the end of the agenda. So if there's any council correspondence, anybody has? Julie?
This is just a minor thing, but it's annoying. Oh, so I don't even know what it's called, but that special metal fence that is right in front of the Cliff House at the intersection there across from the post office. Periodically, it needs to be like tightened up or screwed down or something. So it makes this really loud clank, clank. There's a double clank every time somebody, drives over it. And it's so annoying. I don't know how the Cliff House people can put up with it. Who would want to sit on that veranda out front there and listen to that? So if someone could just do whatever, I don't know how you do it, but we've done it before where it's, every now and then it just needs to be tightened up or something.
Actually, the floodgates you're talking about there.
Yeah, that's what clanks, I think.
Actually, it's the rubber pads that wear from the
Oh.
cars. So we have to replace the rubber pads. So we're working on that.
Oh.
But it is loose because it's a floodgate, so it pops up during high flood waters. So it's just a rubber padding. but
So we
have
just
to-
have rubber pads and they've already been ordered and we're just waiting for them to come in.
Yeah, we're trying to find the manufacturer of that certain unit. So we're either going to maybe make our own rubber pads, but we want to make sure we don't mess up.
Oh, because we've
ability.
had them before, I remember before you worked here.
Yes.
I mean, you worked at the pool, but where it was just really noisy and then finally someone figured out how to fix it and then it was quiet for the next 9 months or whatever.
Right.
I don't know
I was
if I-
actually involved with the first one. That's why I remember the pad.
Oh,
So we replaced the grates with the older grates, which had newer pads on it. And it solved the problem for now. But we have to find the pads. So we're working on that. But the Cliff House did reach out to me as well. And we're keeping in touch with them. So thank you.
I guess I just have one thing. And it's kind of a sideline to the work I do with PPACG. I'll go ahead and forward you all a link to it's consideration for an Amtrak / commuter rail station in Colorado Springs. If you don't want to look at it, you don't have to look at it. But if you're interested, you can look at it. And there's something like 7 proposed sites for a rail station in basically it's downtown Colorado Springs. And John, you're the culprit because when you were talking about multimodal transportation earlier tonight, I said, I guess I'll give people the opportunity to speak to this. So if you want to look at it and you have input, there's a group in Colorado Springs would be delighted to have your comments. If you have other things you want to do, don't worry about it. But I'm going to send that email out to everybody. City Administrator's report.
So just the Serpentine area where MAPS was storing their equipment, that is going to be cleaned up by Wednesday. So just if you get any comments from citizens, it's kind of a messy area. So that will be cleaned up by Wednesday. The fall soccer program begins this week. There's 4 teams in Manatee. Flag football and volleyball are also starting, and they're new programs. Last week they had movie in the park, and it was a success. I believe over 100 folks attended. And then the next one's August 26th at Memorial Park. And then just if there's questions about the dam in the creek at Green Willow, I did reach out to the water commissioner, and because it follows these 3 criteria, it's not a permanent dam. It has an open spillway without a floodgate, and it doesn't increase the size of the creek bank, that it's actually an okay dam to have in a creek. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Roy. Denise?
Just a couple of quick things. The energy efficiency program is going very well. We should have our first being able to pay out our first rebates in the August water bill. So we're starting to get people to participate, which is really great. Also, the draft language for the land use and development code is going to be sent out to the code committee, the rough draft this evening. So they've been putting a lot of hours. That committee deserves a great deal of credit. Natalie, I don't know if you want to mention anything, but they have been putting hours and hours and hours in on this, and we're excited to get ready for the public comment and then take it to Planning Commission and then bring it to you, hopefully for adoption before year end. Natalie, do you want to mention something?
I cannot fully express the dedication of this team. It's crazy. I mean, 3 hours straight yesterday and we wanted to stay longer. I don't know what's wrong with our little group, but I do think it's worth, once this is complete, determining the number of volunteer hours went into it, because it's going to be massive. I mean, there are months we're meeting every week for 2 hours, 3 hours, and then doing homework on the side. And, and starting to get excited that we have a draft to review soon.
Okay. The Carnegie Library design, as you saw, is out front. So that was presented to the HPC. Just want to remind everybody that's still quasi judicial process, but Jeff Parker said we can go ahead and put it out front for people to see. So we're doing that. And then we're getting the word out about the trash enforcement. And we've reached out to the chamber regarding that to try to get the word out. You may have seen it if you're on Facebook, all the items we put out for that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, we are adjourned.